Hello, my name is Dan Root, and I have some decoys hung up in the Mac in Grand Rapids, and they want me to talk about them a little bit. This is what they look like. I'll talk about what I make them out of and how I do it. They're made out of wood. The body is made out of wood. Most of the fins are made out of aluminum. Sometimes I'll have a wood tail. First I start with a saw. I cut them all out, sand them all down. Then I drill a hole in the tail, or I cut out with a bandsaw, I cut the tail like this. I put the tail in. That takes about a week. Then I put the top fin in. That takes about a week. The reason it takes so long is because I epoxy them, and then I epoxy them with a different epoxy and sand them. Otherwise, it's too hard to sand everything at once. Then I put the side fins in. I drill holes in the bottom, and I let them. I have a water tank in my garage that I let them so they hang like this when they're in the water. When you pull them up, they go like this and swim like this for guys for spearing. Some of them I name. This one's named Hector for no reason, but some of the names are uncles, aunts, and friends and stuff like that. People that I like. And the reason I name some of them, because I make big batches, and sometimes people say, Danny, do you have a Hector? And then I know what they're talking about. They're not just saying a green perch with a single side fin. I make quite a few of them. Some are one of a kind. This is one of a kind that I had a piece of wood and I'll just randomly cut them out so they're like an abstract fish. They're not really painted to look like a fish. I start my pattern sort of like a fish, and then I start painting them, and then they get all morphed out of shape, and I just start throwing different colors in, because very few fish look like that. Yeah, this one's a perch. This one might be some kind of trout, but you surely don't have those kind of blues in our freshwater fish. Maybe saltwater, but not freshwater. There's a little crappies. I'll show you my bigger crappies down there in the back. Okay, walk over here to this display. These sort of started as bass. That's not really a top fin of bass, but I like the looks of that, but it sort of looks like a bass. And the color's like a bass too. So I made up, this is a mama, this is a papa, and the reason how you can tell in fish is because the eyes are red and the eyes are blue. And most people don't know that. Right? And then I made 8 female babies and 8 male babies. Pink eyes and blue eyes. Males and females. Makes sense to me. These are bigger than usual. These are not decoys. You don't put these in water. These are decoys. You could spear with these, but these aren't leaded, of course. They'd weigh 50 pounds. And we don't have fish big enough in our water to eat these. The other side of them over here are the koi. I have some koi. And in the middle of the koi is a manatee. I don't know if you can see the manatee. See the manatee? That's a real decoy. This one's named Amy after a good friend of my wife and I's. I don't know if you put that in the hole spearing here in Minnesota, they think you're crazy. But that's what that is. Above you, you'll see these are pretty good spearing decoys, these double fin decoys. I make quite a few of those because they swim really nice in the water. There's an odd one scattered here and there. I don't know the name of this one. Oh, I think that's a Melvin. That's my Uncle Melvin. I think I only made a couple of him. And then we'll go down here. Here's a moose. They're real popular in the water up here. Little Winnie has a lot of little moose like that. And here's a display of crappies. The big ones over here, of course, they're not decoys. I just made them for the fun of it. These are decoys. I didn't name this batch, but this is a pretty good sized crappie. They come bigger, but if you're catching them this big, they're pretty good on the table. These are for spearing, you know. A lot of people spear northerns. The little ones, they're named Bob, Kevin, and Stuart after the Minions. Everybody knows what Minions are. Okay, we'll go over here and I'll show you these. This is a bear buffet at the Mac. So we got 3 bears eating here, and there's a little baby bear over there. I think it's a bear. big bear here, in front of him is some geckos. These are gecko decoys. You see these all over Bacagama Lake. They're just swarming Bacagama. Trout, rainbow. This is a brook, and that's a brown trout. This is one of my favorite decoys here. It's got a nice shine and nice eyes to it and stuff, and it swims really nice, but I'd never put it in the water. I'd never sell it. A lot of these here we just save in our basement because Nancy won't let me sell them. She thinks she's the boss. She might be. Here's a northern decoy. They work pretty good. The big northerns will come after the little ones. Lake trout. They're kind of neat. Here are burbots, or eel pouts, is for slang, but they're. Winnie used to have a Walker Festival, used to go in the winter and they'd be spearing these eel pouts a lot. Now I think it's going to move to Bemidji next year. This is a pretty good size one. Now they're not just color, but I get Rammy and I paint them all different colors. This is a real decoy. This is heavy. And we'll go over here to some of my panfish, pumpkin seeds. These big ones, they're not real decoys. They just look cute. We named this one and this size here are Bentley and Lulabelle from friends of ours. They had two dogs, and Lulabelle was the girl, of course, and she ate all the food, and she was a big dog, and little Bentley didn't get any food, and he was a runt. The story of a man and a woman. The woman gets all the food, and the us men are runts. Here's a nice green one. I like this one. This is one of my wife's favorites. Here's a dogfish. Sort of looks like one because it has a black spot. But other than that, I get tired of painting them. Well, I worked in the house on the computers after I quit construction after about 20 some years. So I started working on computers, and we had a web hosting site, and that lasted about 10, 12 years, and I started going rammy because I was sitting at that computer all the time. I went to an auction, I bought a lathe. I don't know why. So I started I figured, what could I make that's round? Well, I can make lures. We're in northern Minnesota, I'll make those. And about 2 years after that, I'll start making decoys. And the reason I did that is I could still be in the basement and answer the phone. Well, finally we sold that business, and then I was hooked on it. I enjoyed making the decoys and stuff. And then I retired. I hit 62 and retired. This is about 8, 10 years ago or so. And I enjoy this. It's something I can do downstairs. I stay out of trouble, and it's a fun. I don't have to be real talented. It's folk art. It's not. I don't have to be a master as an art to do this. But that's how I got started. For the heck of it, I made a big one. It was 6 feet and weighed 110 pounds. And and I made it out of laminated whitewood from the Home Depot, 2x6s, 2x8s. Well, I wasn't smart enough to realize that wood isn't good enough for those type of projects because it'll shrink and swell differently once it's in the house or in the basement. It's not stable enough. So it had cracks and the fins were out of whack, so I thought I'd make another one to see if I could do better. So I made it out of laminated floor joists, and I hung it at my friend's barber shop downtown here. And then a guy bought it from New York. He had a cabin on Trout Lake, and he saw it and he bought it. So I thought I'd make another one. Well, they were getting so big, the third one, that I needed an engine lift because I couldn't handle it. It weighed 220 pounds. It had a 10-point whitetail rack, and it was 7 feet long. And Katie let me hang it down here at the Mac, but it was so hard to maneuver and took up half the basement. So I hung that out at a friend's, and I'm not going to make any more that big. I sold the stuff because they're too big. I can't handle them. But that's the biggest one. It's 7 feet long, 210 pounds, and there's a 10-point whitetail rack on it. And it's weird, So I leave it out there. I make some small ones. I tried to make some 3-inch ones, but they take almost as long to make as a normal one. This, when I make them, it takes me at least 3 to 4 months to make this decoy. It's not because I work on it every day and it takes that long really, but I have steps. So I cut the wood out, and sometimes if the wood isn't dry enough, I'll leave it in the house for years. I have wood from 2012 in there, and if the wood's good, then I start putting the fins in. It takes me like a week to put the tail fin in, then a week to put this in, because I epoxy them in. They're not sliced in with a utility knife and then tacked in with a nail. These are epoxied in. These aren't going to come out. You're going to have to break the whole decoy. And the lead, I put the lead in, then I epoxy the lead in. I don't want it to ever loosen up. Then I have to epoxy over the top of the lead with a different type of epoxy. It's a marine epoxy. Then I smooth it out so it's nice and smooth. Now when I paint it, because most epoxy has what's called a blush, it'll leave a little darker spot there. And it took me a couple years to learn that. So I have some decoys that are real old that have a little darker spot. Now, it doesn't hurt anything, but the epoxy shows through the white paint a little bit. So now before I paint a dark color, let it dry for a week or so, then I paint again so I get no blush. And I use only oil-based paints because I happen to think they're better. The paint comes from my boat building shop, a shipbuilding shop in New Jersey. I have to order a special. So that's how I make them. And the biggest one was, like I said, 7 feet long, and I probably won't make any bigger. I had a friend come over about a month ago, and he had a bunch of aluminum he gave me. He asked if I wanted it, and I bought some from him before, but I just bartered with him. I shared. Well, this is bigger aluminum, and I said, yeah, I'll take it. And he wants me to make him a dorado, a mahi-mahi from Mexico. So I started those about 3 weeks ago, and I told him I'd have one done by the spring. But I don't like to do one, so I think I have 47 of them I started, from this big to 3 feet, these mahi-mahis. And they're just a bugger, because the fins are nasty on the back. The tail is real sharp and pointed, so you have to use a heavy aluminum, otherwise it'll bend. And that's the kind of projects I like to do, a little bigger and a little different size. And they're painted, it's going to be a different paint job than I'm used to, so it'll be interesting. I'll enjoy that. I don't know. I would have to say the manatee's weirder than the moose. I don't know. The moose might be weirder. I have made decoys that I thought were pretty neat, and I have wrecked them and thrown them in the garbage because I didn't like them. I did have a batch of, I think it was 30 northerns. They were 6 inches long, 30 northerns. Well, that was about a year or two after I started, and I made a mistake. I got goofy, and I epoxied the fins all in at the same time instead of doing it in stages, and it was almost impossible to sand them. And I tried 3 or 4 different times. I had them sitting around for a couple years. Finally, I said, I'm wasting my time on these, so I took 10 snips, and I cut the fins off of them and threw them in the garbage, because they just made me so mad. So I have made mistakes. A lot of them. The weirdest one, though, is probably that, could be that moose or something. Oh, I made some turtles, too. I gave a friend who was graduating out of high school, and she loved turtles, so we made a turtle for her. And I made, I think, 6 of them. But they took so long that I gave her a turtle, and I won't sell the others because they take too long. I mean, they take longer than a fish this big, so it's hard to sand around those legs and the tail and the shell. And so I just saved those, and my wife puts them where she has her collection. Well, most of these are usable. Well, they're not just figures of fish. Most of these are decoys. The real big ones aren't, but most of the ones like this big or smaller are spearing decoys that you use in a dark house. And most guys probably wouldn't use them, but they would work. Even this is sort of like a walleye, and I made it to spear with. It's weighted, you can tell it's heavy, but I made it thinner, because if I made it real thick, this size, it starts to get too heavy. You need too much lead, and it's just, when it's in the hole, it's just like a rock. This is almost a rock too. But I do have big ones that let's see if you can, where's the, I don't know if I brought a big northern down here. Oh yeah, can we show them that northern now, Dave?
Mm-hmm.
this northern up here. Some of the bigger ones I make, that northern is a real decoy. So is that fish over there, but that northern's a decoy that an old timer came to the house and he asked me if I could make him a big decoy. And I said, yeah, I got some 16-inch ones. That's a big decoy. He said, no, I mean a big one. So this is like a 32-inch northern, and it's a decoy. So I made like 3 of them. And I said, well, why do you want one that big? You know, nothing that big is going to come and eat that. And he said, no, but he says, I hang it in a hole. I don't even move it. And he said, I'll just sit there. And he said, all of a sudden, he said, I'll be drinking a cup of coffee or eating a sandwich. And I look down, and there's another northern the same size, just snuggled right up to it. They're like close together. So he says, I reach over and move that, my decoy away and spear it. And he said, I've done that for years. So I sold like 3 of them. I made another, like 4 or 5 of them, and I sold all of them but 2, and I said, I'm going to save 2 because I might not make them that big again. But it's funny what people use. Then I had another guy come over. He said he speared all his life, and he very rarely uses decoys. He uses a top off of a snooze can or a daredevil. He said he'll put a daredevil in a hole or a snooze can, he'll put it down there and jiggle it, and he said the northerns are so stupid they would come in and look at it. Well, I believe it because they're not real bright. But so that's probably the biggest usable decoy I make up there, that one. That muskie over there isn't a real decoy. This muskie up here isn't a decoy. It's a friend wanted one and I made 2 and then I kept that one. And that big perch, that's a huge perch. That is a real decoy. But I just make them for the fun of it, and it's a hobby. There's no money in it like most art. There's no money in it. Well, that's my display. It's nice the Mac let me hang it up. This is Nancy. She comes downstairs once in a while and brings me treats, brings me grapes, pieces of cheese and stuff, walks around a little bit, and then she goes back upstairs. Mm-hmm. I don't know what she does up there, but she knows what I do down there. So
yeah, he stays busy.
That's about it. I hope you come down and look at things. There's a lot more than fish here.
Yes.
Bye.
Thanks.